more than the foods we eat or the environmental things to which we are exposed. It is our thoughts that can really damage our brains. Stay tuned. I'm going to tell you how. We talk a lot about brain health in our culture anymore. Eat this, don't eat that, watch out for this. Oh, be really wary of that. But one of the things that we do not always give enough attention to is our thought life. There are three thinking patterns that can really damage your brain. And I'm going to break those three things down for you right now. Number one, if you want to damage your brain, be cognitively rigid or mentally inflexible. What I mean by that is be kind of cognitively or mentally set in your ways, not on a few topics, but on quite a few topics. This kind of cognitive rigidity, when we look at the brains of people that have a lot of cognitive rigidity, they're kind of hard to change their minds about things. We see a decrease in gray matter in that prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex, remember, is where empathy and altruism are, higher order reasoning. It's where we think before we act. It's a critical part of the brain. And honestly, it's what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. It's what allows us to perform what we call executive function. But rigid thinking is also associated with a decrease in neuroplasticity. So, neuroplasticity is a phenomenon by which our brain can rewire or correct itself when it needs to. So, that might include healing from an injury, but it also includes being able to break neural habits. So if we have a bad mental habit of thinking negative thoughts when a specific trigger comes up, that's a neural habit. And we need that neuroplasticity to be able to rewire so that we can learn to think in new ways. It is a really important construct in what we as Christian believers refer to as renewing of the mind. You don't have a regenerative process of the mind, the spiritual mind, or the mind in general, without neuroplasticity. But the other reason neuroplasticity is really, really important is it improves resilience. So, if we are able to learn new things and grow when we experience life's setbacks or challenges, or when we're confronted with our own shortcomings, that, which is the exact opposite of cognitive rigidity, though engaging in that kind of learning and self-correction improves our neuroplasticity. So when something really difficult comes our way, we lose, somebody passes away that was really close to us, or we have a financial or a career crisis, or uh, something with somebody very dear to us, they're going through something super turbulent or difficult. When life storms hit, if you have good neuroplasticity, you'll be more resilient. You'll be able to respond to those things better. All right, so that was the first thing you can do to damage your brain, be cognitively rigid or mentally inflexible. The second thing you can do if you really want to damage your brain is be judgmental or critical. And I'm not talking about the, occasional, oh, that was kind of a critical thought. I wish I hadn't said it that way, or, oh, it feels a little judgy in my heart. I'm talking about that as a pattern, as kind of a mental lifestyle. What happens when we are judgmental or when we criticize somebody, it produces in the body what we call threat physiology. And that's because the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, is going to respond when we're judgmental or critical. They're going to respond to that stimuli that we're judging or criticizing as if it's a threat to what we hold dear or what we think is good and valuable. And so it might not produce a full-blown fight or flight response, but it's going to produce some stress hormones in our body. And stress hormones are going to do a number of things. They're great when we need to run away from a bear. I've said this before, but not great as kind of a baseline way to live because they really can take a toll on the body. One of the things stress hormones do is they decrease the BDNF in the brain. That's the brain derived neurotrophic factor. And what BDNF is, it is like a fertilizer for all of the neurotransmitters. And so the neurotransmitters are the things that allow the neurons to communicate. So the BDNF, this brain fertilizer, if I can simplify it that way, then allows all of those other neurotransmitters to be produced so that all the neurons can communicate the way God designed them to do. So when we have that elevated limbic response and some extra cortisol in our body, now, especially if it happens over time, our body is not going to produce the kind of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, the brain fertilizer, that we need. But both this, being judgmental and critical, and being cognitively rigid or mentally inflexible, are associated with another phenomenon known as limbic friction. Limbic friction happens when our brain can't quite figure out if it should. Remember, our limbic system and our prefrontal cortex cannot be on at the same time. So if our brain is having a hard time deciding, do we go over here to the emotional part or do we still hang out here with empathy and altruism and being reasonable and rational? What do we do? That we call that limbic friction. And limbic friction tends to result over time in anxiety and depression, but it's also associated with a decrease in the neurotransmitter serotonin. That's one of those really critical neurotransmitters I talked about a few minutes ago that allow neurons to communicate with each other. When there is a decrease in serotonin, you will typically see one, two, or three of the following things: depression, and or anxiety, and or obsessive compulsive behavior, OCD. So that brings me to the third thing. Number one is, being cognitively rigid or cognitively inflexible. That'll damage your brain. Number two is being judgmental or critical. The third thing that you can do if you really want to damage your brain, which I don't think you do, is to be angry and choose not to forgive. Anger, especially over time, is associated with abnormal blood flow. Specifically, there are several areas of the brain where there's not enough blood flow. The blood flow decreases significantly, but it increases in the occipital region of the brain, which is responsible for vision and a number of other things. So, as a result of this abnormal blood flow, when people are really angry or rageful, they might not be able to see straight. They may not be able to talk straight, and they may not be able to think straight. But here's the other thing. When you have abnormal blood flow in the brain, particularly decreases in blood flow, like we see in most of the regions of the brain associated with anger, it tends over time, just like any other part of the body, if it didn't get blood flow, it would be damaged and might even die. Well, that happens to the brain as well. So anger can actually really damage, even destroying parts of the brain, especially when it's accompanied with a choice to not forgive, because not forgiving is associated with increased inflammation in the brain. We now know that inflammation in the brain triggers a neural cascade that results in depression and is has a whole other than set of things that it does to the brain that aren't good for it in the long term. But it also triggers the brain's stress response in the limbic system when we choose not to forgive. Now, Here's the other thing. All three of these things are not just associated with those brain changes that I covered, but because of those brain changes, we typically also see increases in all the mental health diagnoses, as well as a marked increased risk for dementia. So the next time you don't want to learn something new, or you are feeling a little judgy, or you just not sure you want to, forgive, let go of something, you're just going to choose to be mad about it instead. Remember, you're the one that's going to suffer. It's your brain on the line, not theirs. So, in an act of love to yourself, I hope that you will choose to do what's in your best interest. Take care of your brain because God only gave us one. And I hope this has been helpful for you, my dear brother, my dear sister. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.